Hey everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, and you are watching the CD Junkie. On this episode of the CD Junkie, I'm going to talk about, well, I'll briefly go through the history of a band, but I'm really going to focus on a brand new 3 CD reissue of a wonderfully classic album by the Lilac Time. This is a 1991 album called Astronauts. And this 3 CD edition came out on the Needle Mythology label. And this is a wonderfully emotive, beautiful, touching album. Lilac Time is a band led by a British singer-songwriter by the name of Stephen Duffy. Some people may know Stephen Duffy under the moniker Tintin. Had a song called Kiss Me out in the early 80s. Now, Tintin was a group, but it was essentially, that's what Stephen Duffy was known for. What people don't realize is Stephen Duffy was actually a founding member of Duran Duran. Now, if you're thinking Duran Duran, New Romantic, all that kind of stuff, Stephen Duffy's career is not like that at all. Stephen Duffy is a musical chameleon, a brilliant songwriter. And like I said, he was a founding member of Duran Duran. It was him and I believe John Taylor and then Nick Rhodes. And then they brought in everybody else. Now, Stephen left Duran Duran, 79, 80. They brought in Simon Le Bon, and of course, they became worldwide superstars. Stephen went off and formed a band called the Hawks, and they were sort of an alternative rock-inspired band. No keyboards, nothing like that. Just, great collection of songs. They only released 1 single, but recently, over the last couple of years, they released a compilation of demos. I think 4-track demos that they had saved and had remained unreleased for many, many decades. So you really got to hear his formative days of songwriting, after he had left Duran Duran. And again, wipe Duran Duran off your map because Stephen Duffy sounds nothing like that. Then he formed Tintin. They released the single Kiss Me, which actually became bigger here in the States than it did over there in the UK. They released 1 more single, then the band broke up. And then Stephen Duffy released his first solo album called The Ups and Downs in 1985. He released his second album. There was an album somewhere in there that he released under the pseudonym Dr. Calculus, which is just all I guess you can almost say chill ambient music before, that was cool. So then in 1987, I'm at Tower Records in Buena Park, flipping through the bins looking for something to buy, and they're playing some new singles that they got in, import singles. And all of a sudden the song comes on, and it's this jaunty, really folk-inspired track, and the vocalist comes on, and I'm like, that's Stephen Duffy. I mean, I knew it right away. Musically, it wasn't the sort of, commercial pop of his first 2 albums. It was, like I said, it was more of a sort of a jaunty folk, maybe with a little bit of country in there. And I'm just thinking, this is incredible. So I went up and I asked, and I said, is this the new Stephen Duffy? And the guy goes, no, it's the Lilac Time. And then I looked at the single, and it was like, okay, I got to buy this because it was Stephen Duffy. It was his new band. Him and his brother Nick, I think, was involved as well. Then the album came out in 87, and it was just called The Lilac Time. And it was this great, wonderful collection of folk-inspired songs. I mean, still that great Stephen Duffy pop flair. But it wasn't, pop music. It was sort of a mixture of pop and folk and country, and completely different, but the songs just amazing. And then in 1988, out comes the album Paradise Circus. And this is kind of starting to build. People are going, hey, have you heard this Paradise Circus by Lilac Time? And it looked like they were actually going to break through. But by the time the album And Love for All came out in 1989, for some reason, I don't know if it was radio or A&R, they just couldn't package it properly. But this album was an incredibly wonderful pop album. It was produced by John Leckie for the most part. And Andy Partridge from XTC produced a couple tracks. And it was glorious. It was the Lilac Time, definitely. But it had more rock and pop elements and also some psychedelia as well. The album sort of faded away. And I could not believe, because it was prime pop for the American market and the British market, for that matter. Just a wonderful collection. Unfortunately, they got dropped by Fontana. There is a collection, a 2 CD collection out there called Compendium, which contains the best of all three of those first Lilac Time albums, plus some B-sides and stuff. It's just a great collection. But they returned in 1991, Lilac Time did, on the Creation Records label with the original issue of the album Astronauts. This album, in my opinion, was a revelation. They didn't continue in that psychedelic vein, pushing forward and becoming, Brit poppy or whatever. They actually toned everything down. And it's a soft and it's a gentle album. It's not wimpy, but it's beautifully emotional. It's haunting. The Darkness of Her Eyes is one of my favorite songs ever. And it is so friggin' haunting and beautiful. And this album just showed that Stephen Duffy was still an amazing songwriter. And I can't say enough good things about the album. But before I play you some songs from this album, because I want to focus on this album. This is the reason why I'm making this video. Because I'm bringing this to your awareness because it's very limited edition. In fact, the CD might even be sold out already. And I apologize if I'm getting some people excited. Ooh, got to get a hold of that. And then they can't. But I'm not 100% sure. But there's still vinyl out there. I don't know. There's different variations on it. But after this album, Stephen Duffy went back to his solo career, and he put out an album with classical violinist Nigel Kennedy. And then Stephen Duffy became Duffy before the Welsh female singer. Stephen Duffy was actually Duffy. The other one was Duffy, but wasn't Duffy. Stephen Duffy. So he put out 2 albums under the name Duffy, which was Duffy and I Love My Friends. And then he went back to the Lilac Time again, sometimes releasing albums under the name The Lilac Time, sometimes releasing albums under the name Stephen Duffy and the Lilac Time. But before I go into that Lilac Time, I forgot to mention that he did form a very short-lived side project called Me, with I think Justine from Elastica and Alex James from Blur, and that was definitely a Britpop supergroup, so to speak. And they put out 1 single, and I'll show you that when I show you my CD collection. And then in 2002, Stephen Duffy was going through his music collection. He discovered all these demos of songs that he and Nick Rhodes had written during the Duran Duran days. So him and Nick Rhodes got together and recorded an electronica-inspired album where they're re-recording those early songs that they had written together in the pre-famed Duran Duran. Now, some of those songs ended up on the Hawks CD as well, but this album that they released under the name The Devils, it's called Dark Circles, and again, it doesn't sound like Duran Duran. It doesn't sound like Stephen Duffy. It's a whole different thing. It's electronica 2002, these cool little dark pop songs. They don't sound like they would have fit Duran Duran. They don't sound like they fit in Stephen's solo career, but still it was great. And then ever since then, he has released albums under the name The Lilac Time or Stephen Duffy and The Lilac Time. A fantastic band. Most of the time he's been, I believe, with his brother Nick. And there's even an album released by Nick Duffy and The Lilac Time, which I've never been able to get my hands on. But let's talk about this album again really briefly before I go through the catalog. It's beautiful. If the Needle Mythology version is now deleted, I say still try to track it down somehow. Track down the original Creation CD, which doesn't have bonus tracks. I think that Castle reissued a version of it that I'll show in just a few moments, where they added bonus tracks. And those bonus tracks are not necessarily on this. So you're going to need that version as well. But this is a wonderfully beautiful album. You're going to hear a little bit of it in a few moments. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my Stephen Duffy and Lilac Time and Devils and Hawks collection. And I'll just make this really quick. I'm just going to go through the CD collection that I have, show you what's available. You can see the covers, and then you can just dig in, because this is a wonderfully gifted singer-songwriter. I've done a video on Stephen Duffy and the Lilac Time. Did that a couple years ago. But I just love this Astronauts album so much that I just wanted to make a big production, Jazz Hands, and talk about this album and Stephen Duffy, because he's worth your time. Trust me. So why don't you sit back, relax, give this a look, and I will see you on the other side. Stephen Duffy's first post-Duran Duran group was the Hawks, and that's a collection of demos from 80 or 81. This is his first solo album, Ups and Downs, from 1985. Here is the Cherry Red Expanded Edition, a couple extra songs, and fantastic collection. 1986, his second solo album, that's a Japanese-only release. And this here is a compilation of tracks from those albums, plus the Dr. Calculus album, which has never made it on CD. Lilac Time debut album 1987 with bonus tracks, Folky Goodness. Paradise Circus expanded upon that. Again, this is a version with bonus tracks. Then the third Lilac Time album is called And Love for All, produced by John Leckie and Andy Partridge. There's bonus tracks there too. Compendium is a 2 CD collection featuring the best of those three albums, plus B-sides and such. Lilac Time returned with Astronauts in 1991. I believe it's their masterpiece. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Incredible album. This is a version with bonus tracks. He returned to his solo career with Music in Colors, featuring Nigel Kennedy. Then he dived into sort of the Britpop movement. This is the Duffy album, and this is the reissue of it that adds bonus tracks. Not to be confused, by the way, with the Welsh singer Duffy. This is the second Duffy album, called I Love My Friends. This stuff came out before the Welsh one. This is an expanded edition of that. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. Then he formed a short-lived Britpop band with Alex James from Blur, and that was just a single that came out under the name Me, Me, Me. He returned to the Lilac Time with Looking for a Day in the Night, and returning back to the folky sound of old. Lilac 6 came out in 2001. Another great collection. Then he got together with Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, and they re-recorded all the stuff they had written back in the early days. Very electronic and very fantastic. Back to the Lilac Time with Keep Going from 2003. Run Out Groove came out in 2007, and that's under Stephen Duffy and the Lilac Time, as is the other one. Memory and Desire, 30 Years in the Wilderness. This is a soundtrack of sorts to a documentary that has never come out, but it's a great 2 CD collection that spans his career up to that point. Lots of great music on that, if you can find that. And then he returned to the Lilac Time again with No Sad Songs from 2015. Really wonderful. But you knew I was going to say that. Return to Us. This is a cover that's showing, that's sort of a tribute, an homage to their debut album. And it is returning to that folky sound. And then Dance Till All the Stars Come Down came out in 2023. A very wonderful folky album from the Lilac Time and the pen of Stephen Duffy. Now here is Astronauts, the 1991 album. This is came out on Needle Mythology label, on vinyl and CD. This 3 CD set, unfortunately, I believe, is now sold out. They only made 1,000 copies of it. You could probably still get the vinyl if that's not sold out. But I would recommend you check. This is a big, thick book talking about the making of the album. It's an oral history, and it contains 3 CDs. The first CD here that I'm going to show you, this is the remastered version of the album, Astronauts. The second CD, which I'm going to show you here, is like working and writing demo versions of songs off the album. And then finally, this third CD is live, promoting that album and playing some old favorites as well. Even, I believe it has some, at least one Stephen Duffy solo track on there. And that is 3 CD. This is pretty much a masterpiece. The album Astronauts is wonderfully, beautifully touching and amazing. Well, that is or at least my Stephen Duffy CD collection. I'm sure I'm missing tons of stuff. CD singles, very, very worthwhile artist for you to dive into. But let's focus again for just a matter of moments on the album Astronauts. This is just a medley that I made featuring snippets of a handful of songs from this album, because I want you to hear how just glorious this album is. Sit back, relax, give this a listen this time, and I will see you on the other side.
Loving is easier. I turned you on in Bernard Gardens. I turned you on. 'Cause it's hard for me to stay, harder still to stay away. Whisper of your mind ties the flowers to the rain. Window of your dream voices the sun on your lips. Get the faces of forgotten children. Oh, how they cry. They cannot forgive forgetful fathers. Oh, how they lied. Now they try to run away. Hats off, here comes the girl. And I know why, don't know why. Hats off, here comes the girl. And I know why, don't know why. I can't see beyond today. Can't think about what if the sun stays down. I believe it never has before. There may be less between us than we thought. Maybe less between us and the Lord. But nothing comes.
Well, that's it. I hope this inspires you to check out Astronauts by the Lilac Time, or any of the other albums in Stephen Duffy's catalog. I thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, ring that bell for future notifications, and until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.